To give as an introduction to tonight's session on how to give and receive feedback, I wanted to share a few things to orient us to that, because as leaders and members of our church, we carry this responsibility of shepherding people, not just spiritually, but with relationships and as an organisation. And so whatever ministry you're in, you do it beside and with and for people. And one of the most powerful tools God gives us for growth, both in ourselves and in those that we lead and minister to, is feedback. Craig Groeschel, a leader I deeply respect, says that feedback isn't just a tool, it's a gift. And I hope I'm not stealing anything too much from Kim. But too often we treat it like a threat. We avoid it, we sugarcoat it, or we deliver it like a grenade. But what if we reframed feedback? What if we saw feedback not as a hard conversation, but as a developmental conversation? A moment to invest in someone's growth. See, it's not about correction, it's about discipleship. When we reframe feedback as a developmental conversation, we shift from criticism to care, because we're not pointing out flaws, we're calling out potential. And so just quickly as we do introduce, I want to just quickly cover off 4 principles I've learned from Craig that have really helped me as I think about feedback and how I lead. There might be some overlap, I'm not quite sure. I had a quick scan through your PowerPoint just before. But first of all, feedback should be specific and actionable. General comments like, you need to do better, they don't help, right? But saying, in last Sunday's team meeting, I noticed some confusion, let's work on clearer communication, that gives someone a path forward. Also, lead through relationship. Jesus modeled this perfectly. We're not going to attain his standard, but we can certainly follow his example, because he didn't rebuke the disciples before walking with them. And so feedback lands best when it's built on trust and love. The third thing is always communicate belief. So when we give feedback, it's really important that we also attach affirmation to that. Things like, I can see God at work in this area, in you. I believe in you and I believe in your calling. And so that there's also that belief that we have that God is using people for his plans and his purposes. And that sort of kind of encouragement, it sort of opens hearts, not defenses. So one of the hardest things to be is when you receive feedback is to be defensive. But that affirmation of, seeing God at work, I think helps in that. But also to invite reflection. So after sharing feedback, ask, what's one way you feel God might be growing you in this area? Because that turns the moment into a spiritual conversation, not just a leadership one. Church leadership isn't just about talks and tasks. It's about cultivating people. And feedback, when done with grace and truth, becomes a form of discipleship. And leadership isn't about being liked, it's about being trusted. And trust is built when we care enough to speak the truth in love and are humble enough to receive truth back ourselves also. So I just want to, as we open, encourage us to be leaders who speak life, who challenge with compassion, and who steward feedback as a gift and as a tool for growth. Let me pray as we begin. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this opportunity that we can come to learn more about giving and receiving feedback. And we thank you for Kim, who's travelled up to be with us. And may you guide not only this session, but guide our feedback in the future. And may you help create a culture here in our church that not only values feedback, but seeks it out and gives it in a complete spirit of trust and love. We pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. We are recording tonight too, so if you can please use the mic, that will help for those that miss it.
And not use any swear words or anything like that. I'll try and control myself. I don't swear. Hi. How are we all? It's good to be here again with you guys. When was I here last time, Aaron? Last year? Was it November? Yeah. Last time, yeah. That's what I was thinking. That's what I remembered. Yeah, maybe. And you've had my colleague Bill Brown the last couple of times. He's brought a good report about you. Can I give a good report about him? Has he gone okay? That's good. We'll work on the feedback of that in a minute. Maybe that could be our test case about how we work out how to give feedback. What should I say to Bill? So we are talking feedback tonight, and I want to know straight away, when you hear the word feedback, what comes to mind? Word association, call it out. I say feedback, you say? Criticism. What did you say? What's your problem? What did you, did someone over here say something? Audio feed, yeah, that that thing that happens on every movie ever when anyone stands up to a microphone. I'm sure every sound technician goes, they don't all do that. Like, surely. Isn't there someone on the set that's saying, hey guys, like this is a bit overdone, doesn't always feedback. But yes, that high-pitched squeal that doesn't really feel nice. Other words that associate with feedback? Hearing aids, yeah, nice. The feedback loop. Yes, thanks. Yeah, that can be interesting. What would, generally speaking, do you think feedback is positive or negative? Negative? Criticism? Yeah, negative. We sometimes can have like that sort of built up or default picture of which way it tips, because often where we hear the word feedback is when someone says, hey, can I give you some feedback? And you're like, oh no. It can be our default, to think this is going to be bad. We
also probably don't associate encouragement
encouragement and feedback are two different things. I'm saying it into the microphone. Do you like how I did that? Yeah, I'll just repeat what you... Thanks for saying encouragement and feedback. Good. So what we're going to do just in the time that we have is we're going to talk about just some big ideas around feedback, but then look at some mechanics of feedback and hopefully pick up some things along the way. So the first thing is like, why feedback? And as you can see there, the first idea is like you can't improve what you don't review. If you don't know why something is good, you can't make it better. Or you may, if in an attempt to make it better, you might miss what the good thing is, right? Like, so knowing what is good about something allows you to improve it. If you don't know why something's working when it's working, you won't know how to fix it when it's broken. Because if we're not doing this sort of review, and which is a bit of an interchangeable term for feedback is review, right? Is how did it go? What happened? That's a feedback process. So you can't turn good into excellent if you don't know why it's good. We can, in a review process is where feedback can have its moment of really helping us to improve, to advance, to keep hitting the mark. The middle quote there is actually Craig Groeschel. He says, to learn from those who love us so we won't be unnecessarily shocked by those who don't. Right? And if you think about it, like somebody who's like, hey, your fly's undone or something, who says it out of love and care is different, than the kind of sort of point and laugh feedback that you might get from people who are not necessarily on your side. The whole, why didn't anyone tell me, that kind of feeling, like that's not good, right? That's not a sign of love. Like if somebody says to you, hey, you always do this, that's devastating to know that you've been always-ing and no one said anything. Like it feels like someone's not taken the opportunity to serve me and love me like they could. Like getting home and finding you've got broccoli in your teeth. You're like, how long has that been there? Like, how many people have I spoken to? I did it one time with lipstick on my front teeth. I got home from church and it was there. I'm like, none of you are my friends. Like, how many people have I been speaking to? And you're all probably like, I don't know why I didn't pick it up. Normally I notice that people are kind of staring at your mouth, or they start going, and I'm like, is that me too? Like, have you ever tried to do that to somebody though? You just go like this and they go, and you're like, to see how long you can do it before they Got you. But yes, learning from people who love us. And then, as we've already sort of started talking about, this idea of feedback being a form of encouragement, and people need more encouragement than we think. And I think, generally speaking, we assume that there's a whole lot of encouragement, flying around out there, and so mine isn't required. Or we assume that a person knows about themselves enough that they don't need me to tell them that they're good at something. She knows that she can sing well. He knows that he can play guitar well. He knows that. She knows that. They don't need me to tell them. But also, I think when we think around this idea of encouragement, I think sometimes when we're interacting with people, we feel like we're talking to them from neutral. So anything we say to them is either building them up or tearing them down. But I think most people operate below neutral. Like, we're already, if I was to put a microphone to your inner thoughts, the majority of them are leading you towards a negative self-thinking, right? Like, you're not walking around going, "You're amazing, well done, this is good, keep it up, get it up." Like most of it's like, "Oh, I forgot the thing," and "Oh, I didn't do that," and "Oh, that didn't come out the way I wanted it to." Like, "Oh, she's looking at me funny, she must think something bad." Like, we're doing that sort of so we're already behind. So when you're talking about encountering other people, whatever we say we need to say it enough that gets them up to neutral and then into positive before it's even received as encouragement, right? So even thinking about that, people need more encouragement than we need. Talk to the person near you, or little groups of people. What comes up straight away when you just start thinking about that idea of why feedback, what do we need it for, what's the mechanism, just what's coming up already as you're starting to talk about it. Quick chat to each other, go. Just what's coming up for you, and when you in that initial understanding of what feedback is and what it's about. All right. Anything interesting that cropped up just in that initial thought? Anything that someone else said that you think we should all hear?
I'm giving you such positive feedback. We were talking about even the notion of review is way less confrontational than
Feedback, yeah. It's such a loaded term, isn't it? Feedback, yeah. It's not a neutral term. You have to sort of say what kind of feedback it is, even to try and bring it to neutral. That's good. Yeah. Yes. So tell us the good one that you said. Just the one.
When they start off by saying we should speak the truth with love, you know you're in for something.
That's so true, isn't it? Speak the truth. I'm going to speak the truth in love. It's like that was a unloving thing. And also that statement wasn't meant to be you didn't know this already. Like, those two things are mutually are unable to be excluded from each other, truth and love. Like, if it's not loving, it's not true, even if it's corrective, right? Like, it still has to have love behind it, because truth and love are synonym. And so they go together. So, yes, good thoughts about, we all have that. There's some phrases, and we'll get to them in a minute, of what, that just triggers you, this is going to be bad. It's like I'm not racist, but you're like, prepare yourself for the most racist thing you've ever heard in your entire life. I don't mean to be mean, but I'm not judging anyone, but you're just like, okay, here we go. Don't take this the wrong way. Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm just saying. All right, how to ask for feedback. So when we're thinking about creating a feedback culture, and as our title for tonight, it's how to ask for feedback and how to give it are the two components of it. But the reason that I use the word feedback culture is that I think the more work we do to make feedback and review, or whatever language we put to it, part of our culture, the better it's going to be in terms of how it's received. We're going to get better at giving it. It's going to be more part of the DNA of how we function, rather than it's a task that we do. Now we're entering into the feedback section of the meeting. You know, that it's just innate in how we interact and how we go about our work. But one of the podcasts I listen to it's called Your Brain at Work, and it is released by the Neuro Leadership Institute, which I was saying to someone today, like neurology, neuroscience and leadership are like two of my favourite things, and they come together. It's like, so the Neuro Leadership Institute, but they have done the research around this, and asking for feedback reduces threat by 50% in both the asker and the giver. So they equate knowing you're about to get feedback or give feedback, the process of feeding back, has the same impact on your body as going for a run. So elevated heart rate, releasing certain chemicals and hormones. As soon as I say, and it's like we're talking about the word so loaded, as soon as, hey, I just wanted to give you some feedback, or can I get some feedback, like straight away, that just the word and the idea, we're exhausted, right? Like we're elevated in our systems and and you can imagine with all of that sort of coursing through our bodies, our brains are not going to be as clear as they might otherwise be. So we're already making this a potentially bad interaction, right? Because we're stressed, essentially. So asking, though, reduces threat in both the asker and the receiver by 50%. So if you think about where, like, let's have feedback, and we're, but then if it is, hey, Aaron, could you give me some feedback? It reduces my threat by 50% at least, because I'm not worried that he's going to give it to me when I'm not ready for it, because I'm asking for it, right? So I've already positioned, I know it's coming. It's not going to blindside me. So I'm ready. But also he's not thinking, I'm going to have to give Kim feedback. I'm looking for a spot. She's invited it. Now I've already got past that initial obstacle or that initial hurdle. So asking reduces threat by 50%. The work of the Neuro Leadership Institute is around these different threats that exist when we have conversations or interactions that are more either sort of challenging or conflict-oriented, which feedback fits into that category, right? So often feedback is this, it's going to be a little bit difficult because I have to tell you something you didn't know, right? Because that's what feedback is. Even if I've asked for it, it's something I didn't know yet. Like, how did that go tonight? How did they receive that? What happened here? What did you perceive? It's something I don't know yet. But this idea of the SCARF threat, status, certainty, autonomy, relationship, or fairness, it's this whole piece of work, and we won't spend too long there, just to recognise that in every human interaction, the potential is there to trigger these threats in other people. So the status one is, this is going to impact either my sense of identity or your experience of me. So it could be my job's on the line or my performance is on the line. So this is the threat that I might feel. Certainty is, we all live with the degree of certainty threat all the time, which is the things that I've planned and the things that I'm hoping for, I'm not sure if they're going to happen, right? And then there's weather and there's war and there's other people and there's all these things that sort of keep coming at me to challenge my certainty. Autonomy or authority is you basically going to come and tell me what to do, and you're going to usurp my sense of self-control or self-decision, self-direction. Relationship is this interaction going to threaten our relationship or my relationship with someone else? And then the fairness thing is like, is there justice issues at play here? But I think it's a good little filter to put over, you know, when sometimes you walk away from one of these conversations and you're like, that went a lot weirder than I thought it was going to go. Like, that got really intense really fast. It's often because we've triggered a threat in the other person. But then the step back is also to realise that these threats exist in us too. So when I'm coming to you to give feedback or to ask for feedback, potentially these things are on the line for me. And so my threat meets your threat, and then we're talking about that elevation again. So it's just a good thing to sort of keep in mind and be aware of. So when we're thinking about asking for feedback, though, just a few points here. Be intentional. As I said, invited feedback is always better than when it's imposed. You can't be discipled by force, right? You have to participate in that process. So you are inviting that and asking for it and being proactive about it. And not that in a healthy feedback culture, people shouldn't feel the need to raise issues with me because I'm always giving them the opportunity to talk as we go along. So I'm taking away that sort of icky thing when it's like, oh, I'm going to have that meeting and I'm going to have to tell them. If I'm constantly, intentionally asking for feedback, we shouldn't need to have that meeting because it will have come up already and the opportunity will have already been created. Choosing wisely, not all feedback is created equal, right? Some people's opinion and perspective and what is less helpful than others, or sometimes the way they give it, sometimes because of their knowledge or their position in the story of whatever the feedback is about. But you want people who are for you, people whose intention and honesty you trust, people who are aware of what it is that you're wanting the feedback about. You know, like, how do you think I went on the football field today? Oh, I don't know, I've never seen football in my life. You know, like, I don't know, good running, good with the sport. You know, like if you're looking for genuine feedback, find someone who knows something about what it is that you're doing, except in the case where what you're wanting is an uneducated person's perspective, right? So which often happens in, say, the preaching world. If you're really wanting some helpful developmental feedback about preaching, you ask someone who preaches or who knows about preaching. But if you want to know what does the average punter in a pew think of my preaching, then you ask an average punter in the pew, right? Because we could sit in our office and go, I think everybody liked it. You know, like they all nodded at the right time. But if I really want to know how a non-preaching person or a person who wasn't part of the process of planning the sermon and writing the sermon and researching the sermon, what did you get out of it? Like, be intentional, all right, about who you're asking for what. And as it says there, be specific about what you're wanting reviewed. I think there's a value if we're getting into this space of asking for other people's feedback is to set them up with the tools that they need to do that well. So it might be, I'm preaching this morning. After I preach, I'm going to ask you how I went. Can you listen and be ready to answer that question? Like you sort of setting them up to be switched rather than get to the end. They go, or I had a great nap. I don't know, like, you know, what that might be. But also even better is to get more specific and say, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to tell a story at the start of my sermon. Could you just listen to that? And at the end, I'm going to ask you whether you thought I told it well or whether you thought it was appropriate or whether, you know, and I'm going to just ask you about that one thing. So you're setting them up, particularly as if you're new in the giving feedback space, you're putting the cookies on the lowest shelf to say, I just want feedback on one thing. Because when you're not specific, the whole what did you think is what we talked about right from the start. Nearly everyone will go to a negative place there because as soon as they like, oh, feedback, what didn't I like? It was too long, you know, and you're not getting the most helpful or measured responses if you don't set them up to win. And that whole thing there about identifying your sensitivities, knowing yourself in that process of feedback. In my previous church where I was on staff, we used to do a Monday morning meeting, a review, and we would review everything from Sunday, like everything, how warm the room was and how, you know, long the singing went and whether that song was good or that song was good and how the prayer time was and who was in the foyer. Like we would just review everything as part of our process of wanting to keep improving and learning as much as we could. But the number of times that, you know, and in that the sermon would get reviewed, and if someone from within that, if the sermon was preached by someone who's not in that room, we would review and one of us would be ready to review and give feedback to whoever it was that preached. But there was a few times where I'd walk into that meeting, I'm the one who's preached or I'm the one who's led worship or I've done something and I already am feeling something. You know, like the number of, you know, I got knocked over as I came off the stage. I had that one time where a guy literally came up to me as I'm walking down the stairs. He met me at the bottom to give me feedback on my sermon. Actually, and the sermon was about how your words could bring life or death. And he's like, that was great. I'm like, thank you, bring life. And then he goes, but, and I just literally went, like, don't, like, you. Did you hear what she said? Yeah, here's some feedback for you. Open your ears. But it was just like, but I was already, and his thing was, I can't remember the actual detail of what he'd said. But so when we came into our meeting, I'm like, I've already had a hit on this one. Like, I'm a little bit bruised, on this one. And it's not to say, therefore, you can't give me any feedback because I'm shutting this down. But it's just to say, just know that there's an existing vibe here. You're kind of identifying for others where the landmines are, rather than letting them discover that by accident as it blows up in their face. So when you're thinking about knowing yourself and identifying your sensitivities, it's, I reckon a really good question is, when you're thinking about asking for feedback, what am I hesitant to ask and why am I hesitant to ask it? Like, would I go and say, hey, what did you think of that song? Or am I not willing to ask that, and why would that be? Am I not confident? Did it not go? Like, where is that coming from, or where's my orientation, or where's my sense of value being placed in that? So thinking about that and naming it and addressing it. Tell the people around you, what's your experience of asking for feedback? How's it gone? What have you, just a little quick about what have you experienced in the world of asking other people for feedback? How'd it go? Just finish that thought. All right. Any thoughts or observations that came out in that quick sharing of your experience of asking, or your reflections on asking? Headset. Oh, bless.
I think when I've asked for feedback, but I can't remember where it's gone badly.
Yeah, right.
And I think that shows how
The power of it, yeah.
that when you actually ask for it, the ones that go terribly are when you have it.
Yeah, and it comes at you. And it makes sense, right? Because if you think about that threat reduction, that if I feel like I'm going to have to bring something up that you're not asking me to bring up, I'm already having to commit on the throttle, to get there. So I'm likely to just come at you way harder. Like, oh, I can't do that. It's like, whoa, sorry, I came in a bit hard and hot there. Whereas if you ask me, it's like, okay, let me reflect on this. Like, it's a very different posture that it is, and it's a trust.
I want to find out
Yeah. Yeah. So I've already ticked that thing off. He's not resistant to me talking to him about it. I've got rid of that. And also, he must trust me because he's asked me. So I don't have to prove that it's me who should be telling him. I used to be the CEO of the FBI of the NCRS, and this is why I'm telling you that in my experience, because I'm thinking I have to validate my credentials, to why you would listen to my feedback. But if you've asked me, I don't need those because you want my feedback, and that's the main thing that I would have been trying to prove to you that you should have. So yeah, it's good. It's good. So when we think about receiving feedback, feedback is not a right. You're not entitled to it. Whenever you get it. It's a gift and you have to treat it that way. Okay, breathe with me. Don't be defensive is the number one thing. This feels like that statement, like, what is it? Never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. Like, this feels like that. Like, never in the history of being defensive has anyone stopped being defensive by being told not to be defensive. It's like, I'm not being defensive. But it's like, it's really difficult, but it's actually critical to a healthy culture of feedback, because if you make it too hard for someone to give you feedback, they'll stop doing it. You know, so and defensiveness can, for the other person, be experienced as aggression. And they're like, I did not sign up for that fight, so I'm not doing that again.
I used to be terrible at being defensive.
Oh, it's the worst.
Tiniest little bit of feedback that wasn't
But, yeah. Well, and this is the thing that happens, because the tip here being to focus on what's helpful, because often, particularly if people are giving you feedback without having thought through it, you know, in advance, or maybe when you haven't asked for it, so they are coming on a little bit hotter and faster, that they can be a bit of a mess in how they give it to you. And it's easy to say, oh no, but it was, oh no, that was because of, and no, like, you know, there's all these things you don't know. Like, let me educate you on why your feedback is incorrect. You know, but also to remember that what they are giving you is their opinion, and that's exactly what you're asking for when you want feedback, is their opinion. Like, you don't want to know what your notes said, because you know that. You want to know what they heard, right? So it is their opinion. So in that sense, it's not wrong. Like, it may not be that you have to do everything they tell you. Like, it may not be accurate to what you're trying to achieve, but it's not wrong if you've asked for someone's opinion for them to give then their opinion. I felt like it was too long. Well, it actually wasn't, but that's not the point. You felt like it was. You know, that's where we go. So what is helpful in there? Don't disregard everything because you don't agree with, you know, one thing, or they get some fact wrong in their thing. Don't shoot the messenger. I need to change the slide for this, because I was in a LOTE, like a language other than English group, and I was being translated. This sentence doesn't translate very well when you have to just explain it. Well, what this means is when someone comes at you, don't shoot them. It's just like, hang on a minute, that just got violent very quickly. And so I'm like, oh, the basic premise is don't bring harm to the person who brought you the message because they're the one who brought the message. Like, they shouldn't be unduly punished for bringing it. So I'll be changing the language on that one for the future. As I said, they may not give it well, the feedback well, and probably won't give the feedback well, but still, it's, you know, it might be true. Asking questions to clarify. When you say da-da-da-da, do you mean this or this? When you say it was too long, do you mean it felt too long, or did I actually go over on time, or what had you anticipated a certain length of time? What was, you know, give me some more information, because if you don't have that clarity, to walk away from that feedback, there's nothing you can do with it, right? Like, oh, they said it was long, but I mean, it wasn't on the run sheet, but I guess, I don't know, what do they mean? Yeah, and so you don't get to do anything with it. And yeah, that's right. It was because I didn't move off that note the whole time. So it could be in the moment that you say, oh, but it's very hard to ask clarifying questions without sounding defensive, right? What do you mean it was too long? So it may be that you have to come back later when emotion is sort of diffused a little bit and when it seems a bit more measured. Hey, just circling back, yesterday you said that it went long. Can you just tell me exactly what that felt like for you, or can you give me some more information about that, just so that we can add that into our conversation and thinking for next time, you know, that you circle back. So making sure you choose the right time to do that. Thank them. You want to assure that the safety and relationship has been maintained. You know, so thanks for giving me that. I know that might have been hard, or even it was hard for me, but thanks for doing it. Like, this is a healthy thing. This is only going to help us all get better, that you've given me this feedback. So I appreciate that. Adam Grant quote here: the best way to get honest feedback is to reward people for giving it. if you make it hard to tell you the truth, people will take the easy way out. When people have the courage to be candid, you can reinforce it with gratitude and curiosity. This idea of tell me more, help me understand, and thanks for wanting this to be better, or wanting me to be better, and for being brave enough and trusting enough to bring this to me, so that there's that reinforcement that things are okay out of that. And when you go back to those threats, we haven't threatened relationship. We haven't, made sort of some irreparable moves there. And then the final thing is to communicate the impact. And to implement feedback and demonstrate that you implement feedback. How many of you have filled out some survey for something and you think, nothing happened here? Like, what would you like to see in the, what biscuits would you like to see in the break room? And then they were never there. Like, I don't know if they ever took my advice. When you just get those, and you're just like, oh, this is not going anywhere. So if you want to continue to have healthy feedback, you need to show that feedback gets processed. It doesn't mean you have to do everything, but you have to show that what has been reviewed or what has been fed back to us has been considered. When we built a new building and we put in, it was a genius move. I don't know whose it was. Let's just say it was mine because it was so good. But it was someone's idea. But to put like a question box or a suggestion box in the foyer, because we moved into this brand new building and we're like, people are going to be like, why is the door there and what's this for and why is that, that kind of stuff. And we were like, if we give them a process to do that, as pastors and leaders, we won't spend the first Sunday answering questions about door handles. This could release us. And as it was, there would have, I think we counted something like 26 pieces of feedback to say there was no bin in the ladies' restroom. And we were like, well, we just saved ourselves 26 conversations, right? Because they wrote it there. But also, we were then able, the next week, we said, oh, bathroom didn't have any bins in it. There's an oversight. Thanks for everybody who gave us that feedback. We've, noted that and we've responded to it. Now, in that feedback box were a whole other points of feedback. Some of them were stupid, we don't like the colour of the doors, and we don't, why did you put that over there? And I thought you were going to, and so there was stuff in there that we probably weren't going to do anything with, or it wasn't as helpful. But those people who gave that feedback know that we read it because we said something about the other things that we read. So they know that got heard. And so it doesn't have to be that we changed all the door colour by the next week, but that person knows we know their preference about the colours of the door. So communicating the impact, and then thinking too about how much weight we give to each piece of feedback that we give, because it's, as I said, it's not all created equal. And it's not to say those people's feedback we dismiss, but if they're less educated or they're less aware, they don't have some of the information, maybe that isn't as useful or isn't going to impact what you do moving forward than, say, somebody who is well in tune with that. I remember having a conversation with my worship team. So I'd been on worship and we'd introduced a new song, and I had just sort of sung the first verse and then everybody joins in, and my senior pastor the next day in our review thing, he said, I didn't think that went great. It was a bit thin and it was hard to follow, and I'm not sure it was the best way to introduce this new song. I was like, okay, good feedback. I mean, he can't sing a lick. And so he was like, that was average Joe, right? So it was like, okay, thanks. But so the next Sunday, when I'm at rehearsal and we're getting ready to do that song, and I said, I think maybe we'll do All In at the start or do something different at the start, because I got this feedback that had been a bit hard in the first bit. And someone in the band said, who gave you that feedback? And I didn't answer. And then they said, was it the worship pastor who was in that meeting? And I said, oh, no, it wasn't him. And they're like, well, so do we just put that in the right place of that's an opinion, not necessarily an expert suggestion? It's like, cool. And not is that you don't have any part to play here. We're not listening to anyone who's not a musical professional. But what we end up talking about was all songs feel weird when you first hear them, right? It's sort of, I didn't know what was going on, didn't know where it was going kind of thing. Huh?
Something going from unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it was one of those classic ones where it is a really thin verse, and then it just kicks in with a big, powerful chorus and bridge and stuff. It's like, we just got to get over this verse to get us to that thing, you know. And so we had a conversation about it, but we don't have to not do it now because that one person. And even he's the senior pastor, so he had a lot of authority and, you know, clout, as it were, in the room, but not the expertise. And so we filed that where it needed to be filed, you know, and we got a good, sorry? In the round thing, in the ladies. But we got a good review from him the next week. He goes, oh no, I see what you mean now. Yeah, no, it builds up. And, you know, like, thank you. Maybe give us another week next time before you have to give us your feedback.
In a workplace I was in previously, I had a meeting with my boss's boss, who sat me down and had a chat with me, and I was within my first 6 months there, and she gave me some feedback, and my response to her was, well, thank you for that feedback. I'll go away and I'll, you know, process that, and if I need to make any changes, I'll put them in place. And she was like, oh, okay. And she came back to me a couple of weeks later and said, I was so offended when you said that to me. But you know what? I did that with my boss last week, and like, yeah, you know, just because they've said it doesn't
make
mean
it
that it's actually true. I need
Yeah.
to change something, whatever. I need to work out how to, you know, process all that
Yeah.
and make it, you know, whatever's valid, yes, implement whatever.
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, you know, I was so offended because I'm like, oh,
You meant to do what I said. Yeah.
and just have you
Yeah.
say that to me, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
But I just come out of an environment where we did that sort of stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she'd never experienced that before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's good. And which kind of highlights the emphasis or the need for good communication around that stuff, right? Like where you just don't go, thanks, and just walk away and it's zero, you know, or you go, sure, yeah, sure, and then you don't do it. You know, like the good communication and high trust means that we get to process that out in a healthy way. All right, so thinking about receiving feedback, tell the person next to you how's that sitting for you? Like what's kind of like, oh, am I okay with these things? Or is there one on there that's like, that's a good point, I should take that on board a little bit more. Have just a really brief chat with the person around you about receiving feedback. All right. Did anyone say anything that you think the rest of us should hear about what it's like to receive feedback? Yeah. It's like, oh, you love me too. Fabulous. Keep it coming. I love this feedback. I'll listen to it all day.
It depends on who's giving the feedback.
For sure. Say more about that.
If somebody who knows will take notice.
Yep.
Should know or does know.
Yep. Trust. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Experience at all, ever. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I did receive feedback once.
Yep.
There's a lot of untruths in it. The organisation obviously allowed the person receiving the feedback, and it was your annual review.
Right.
Career is dependent on it.
Yeah. Right.
There was a mechanism for you to respond. So you responded with fact, and this bloke got removed at command.
Right. That's significant. Yeah.
You don't use the troops' travel and subsistence allowance
Yeah.
to buy loose and hay to feed the horses in the week.
Just again, speaking hypothetically. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the whole process of receiving feedback, like it's, you don't have to listen to lies, and you don't have to, like, if there's factual inconsistencies or things that are incorrect, you know, it's okay to have the conversation of realigning, but it's making sure that if this mechanism is that we're asking for feedback for growth and development, that we're maximising the opportunity for growth and development from that conversation. Like, I mean, it's a little bit different if you're talking about performance review or jobs on the line, tick boxes, you know, in that sense. But if this is a developmental conversation, and someone comes at me with a whole lot of stuff that's just way off base, they don't know enough to be saying what they're saying. Like, it doesn't mean that we don't challenge that or ask questions of that, but it's making sure that we're doing that in this posture of, this is, I want to learn, so this is why I need to clarify these things. This is what I need to understand. This is like, and if you had this information, do you think that would change your perspective? Like, you know, those the opportunity to do that, again, maybe not in the moment because of the potential for emotional sort of escalation, but at some point, like, I had a very significant issue of conflict with a staff member at a previous workplace, and she came at me very hard with some really strong accusations and allegations and just assumptions and all, like, and just verbally sprayed me, and it was all based on one thing that was wrong. Like, it just literally was like fruit of a poisonous tree. I mean, there's probably some perspective about me as a person that she just needed to get off her chest, but it was the basic situation that had started the whole process. We were misaligned, you know, and so we had to come back around to that. It took a long time to get back to it though, like, but we didn't have to settle for it, but it was a big process to get ourselves to a healthy place with it. Yeah. Hang on, sorry, one here.
Should feedback be automatic? Expected? Like, if I joined a group where Aaron had a few passes of training,
Yeah.
I would expect feedback.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
are you going to tell me?
Yeah. Which is a sign of, that's a good attitude to have. I don't think, I mean, should it? Like, I think the healthiest cultures are marked with by a culture of feedback, but it isn't assumed. Like, and in fact, it's not just not assumed that from a receiving end, some people are just not good at giving it either. Like, it just isn't part of their practice.
When I was doing teacher training, I got the most from teachers from another subject area who knew nothing about my content, but looked at my method.
Yes, yeah.
That's where I learned.
Yeah, it's good, and they can bring a different perspective and clarity because they're not bogged down by whether your content's correct. Yeah, it's good, it's helpful. Yeah.
I think when you're in that learning process, people hope that
Yeah, it's true.
you got there.
Yeah, it's true.
Sort of actually have to go seeking it rather
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, and possibly too, the more senior you get in an organisation, the less likely you are to have people who are giving it to you freely, or that it's the culture. And Andy Stanley talks about this. Like, if you stop listening to people's feedback, you'll end up surrounded by people who have nothing to say. You know, that you can get yourself into organisationally or by power and position and practice, you can get yourself into a position where everybody just says, yep, that was great, because there's not the mechanism or the pathways for them to give genuine feedback and genuine responses. All right, so how to give feedback. This is the second part of our equation tonight, thinking about how to give feedback. I think there's two really important parts of this as a starting idea, is that, again, often when people ask for feedback, they assume negative, right? Like, that it has to be critical, or it has to be in some way like pointing out what went wrong or what was bad. And so I think sometimes we've got to train our brain to look for things that are good, right? To look for things that can be celebrated. And I know for me, my kind of leadership brain, we talk about, like, leaders often are in spaces we're so intent on improving things and making it better and making it most effective that it's really easy to just be in every space looking for the 1% that could get better and the things that didn't go quite right. You know, if I was here, I'd do this and I would have said that first. And like, it can be the way our brains default to, but to actually train our brains to go, what's good here? Like, what can I learn from this space? What's here that I wouldn't have thought to do but is, you know, effective? Or like, training ourselves to look for things to encourage, to look for, you know, to be sort of tuned into God, to know what can be affirmed and built up. And as I said, if you're thinking about everyone needs more encouragement than we think, God help me, like, how do I encourage this person? What can I speak into their situation right now that will build courage in them? And training ourselves around that. I think about my own experience of developing, particularly as a preacher, and for me, it was all about encouragement. And that was because my first sermon was horrendous. Thank the good Lord above, it was before we were recording these things on the interwebs, and so now who knows where it went. No evidence of it at all. But if I had have come off, you know, into the review meeting on Monday and they had gone through everything that I did wrong and everything that I needed to fix and everything I needed to prove, I don't think I would have ever preached again. But I came off at the platform or into that meeting and they started with, here's like, oh, you're a great storyteller, Kim. That was the first piece of encouragement I remember from that first sermon. You tell a good story, right? I'm like, oh, okay, so it's worth telling a story again. So I've got this sort of something to build myself up as a communicator on. Like, I've got a platform now. I'm a good storyteller, all right. And now I'm saying, well, then what else can I do to get better at the other things? Because I'm like, there's something of value here for me. Whereas, as I said, like, preaching is not something you do for fun. So it's like, if, you know, it's a lot of work and there's a lot of exposure and there's a lot of spiritual sort of wrestling you do around it, that if there's nothing to be encouraged in there, there's no point. Right? Like, that's too hard. Like, and so, but give somebody some encouragement. Here's what went well. Here's what I think you have high capacity for or potential in or whatever. It's like, okay, I can start building something on that. I've got a platform or I've got a solid foundation that I can do it. Now, here's my little bugbear when we talk about giving feedback, and the science will tell us there is no such thing as constructive criticism. Those two words are opposite to each other. Constructive means to build up. Criticize means to find fault for the purpose of tearing down. Critique is a different word, a different meaning, but constructive criticism are opposite. And what we know from research is that if someone says to you, I have some constructive criticism, your brain goes into meltdown mode because it's like, are you building me up or are you tearing me down? Are you my friend or are you my enemy? Do I have to defend myself against you, or can I open myself up to you and trust you? And if you think back to that threat thing, like, it just absolutely elevates fight or flight. Our brains go into this like overdrive, and whatever you said after that, we're not hearing anyway, right? Because our brains are just like, ugh. My theory is we say constructive criticism as the giver of criticism, as a little bit of a let me off the hook here, because I've got something hard to tell you, right? And it's for me, not for you. I'm like, constructive criticism. It's like, not racist, but like, yeah, constructive is my bet. You can have the criticism bet. But what I think and the reason I'm drawing attention to it is because I think it's a falsehood that we think we've softened the blow, and so now we can be a little less careful about what we say after that because it's constructive, right? Like, I can be a bit harsher because, you know, I'm trying to be constructive, you know. Whereas I think, just to name, I've got some difficult feedback, like, or I've got some stuff that I think we need to be looking at because it didn't go well. You know, that just naming it for what it is a safer way to bring in harder things than to pretend that, not that we're pretending to be constructive. Like, of course, I hope our attitude is that. But what we deceive ourselves into thinking is by using that phrase, we've made it that whatever comes next is going to be easy and easy for the person to accept. So again, with this, like recognizing that people are their own worst critics and they probably know everything they did wrong and it's already up here, and us giving an external voice to it is actually a magnifying or a multiplying of that negativity. It's not speaking into a void. So anytime we're coming in that construct, we have to be so careful with how we speak into those spaces because they're very vulnerable. And you, as I say, you're not speaking into a void. You're giving external voice to potentially their own fears and their own sense of inadequacy and concern. And so then the gift there could be just to stop at encouragement. And another little piece of science, you know, the old praise sandwich, you know, one good thing, one hard thing, and then another good thing. And the idea being that by putting the bitter tasting negative thing between the two pieces of bread, you won't taste the thing, you'll just taste bread, and so it'll all be fine. The science tells us, research is anything up to a ratio of 5 to 1 up to 200 to 1 in terms of positive to negative for that to feel balanced for the person receiving it. So if you're thinking of a sandwich, it's like lots of bread to get rid of that taste. But again, I think we do the praise sandwich as a little bit of like, this won't be quite as hard if I just like squeeze it in between two good things, you might not notice how hard it is, you know. But again, it's kind of for me, like rather than saying, let me acknowledge that this is hard. I'm not trying to pretend to you that it wasn't hard because look at all that bread, it was amazing. I hadn't even noticed the bit in the middle. But the idea of praising is important in feedback because, again, it's this idea of encouragement. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because there are some good things here. Like I want to give some context to this, that the reason I'm telling you the harder thing is because there's all these other good things that I want to celebrate and build from, but not in that sense that I've just, like that middle bit won't hurt or won't be hard or won't need to still be, that we don't still need to be careful about how we deliver it when we do it.
Someone for something they've done well, and then say, what would you do differently next time, to see if they are aware of
that there's some opportunities for growth. Yeah.
And then you can talk about that. Yeah. And if they don't come up
find
with
it,
yeah. What about this?
Yeah.
You know, and then and how can I support you in that? You know, like it's actually a really different way to frame that.
Yeah.
So it's not your quick sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And when we're talking about giving harder feedback, future-focused language will make it more palatable. So rather than, you shouldn't have done that, that didn't work, that was terrible, next time I wouldn't do it that way. In future, we need to have more of this and less of that. Like, just, again, that future-oriented language tells me I'm going to get another chance to do this again. Like, think back to the scarf threat. My status isn't on the line here. Like, you're not suggesting that I'll never get to do this again and because it sucked so badly. Like, you're saying, when I'm doing it again, in future, let's improve that. Again, my posture's going to change and because you've taken away some of those threats and I might be more willing and able to listen to it. The Neuros Leadership Institute talks about, rather than saying what I need you to start or what I need you to stop or continue, they use the language, what you did well, what you could do better, and what you might do next. Well, better, next, as a different language. I think it's more sort of associated with that growth mindset and psychological safety. Thinking about what the main thing might be. I think about this again in the preaching context. Like, if somebody, because we used to train up our young preachers, and one of the things that happened in our preacher development space was that if a new person was preaching, they had to ask for feedback afterwards. And as I said, if we would have our meeting on Monday and one of us would be deputised to be the giver of the feedback, but they had to come and ask for it because of this. But also, and if they didn't, they just didn't get a chance to preach again. And there was one person who did that, and I actually followed him up later. I'm like, you're not coming for feedback? He goes, no, I don't. Like he goes, I know that it wasn't my thing, and I'm not sure that I ever want to do it again anyway. I'm like, oh, okay, but we're here if you need us. But again, giving them that sort of pattern that this is how we will make this, assumed that feedback will be part of the story. But when we think about addressing the main thing, like with some of our young preachers, like there's a lot of stuff they could get better at, right? like you didn't do this and you didn't do that and there was this and there was this. Like there's a whole lot of stuff. But in one meeting of feedback, they need to leave with something they can actually action. And a list of 27 things will not cut it. So what's the main thing? And I think sometimes we can kind of condense some of the things into more of a bigger picture idea of something to work on in future. I was talking with a pastor recently who was getting ready to review one of her developing pastors. And she said, he did this and there was this and I'm not sure about that, I'm not sure about that. And so we kept talking about it. And what we landed on was that he didn't have the trust of his audience. He was assuming that everyone in the room just assumed that he knew what he was talking about, assumed that he was a fun guy, or assumed, like, he just had no relationship with them. And so she talked about her one thing was that you need to do things to build trust with your audience. So you build trust by citing your references. You build trust by talking about, the scriptures that you read and where they're from, like, rather than just, it says in the Bible. You build trust by being a little bit more vulnerable about your own part in whatever, a bit more humble to say, I'm learning this too. You build trust. So there's all these other things that came out of it, but his one takeaway that he's working on for his next sermon is, how do I build trust with my thing? So thinking about, is there one thing that if they were to do that next time, it would make an improvement, rather than here's a laundry list of all the things that went wrong. Assuming the best, often our feedback can be like, why did you play a game that broke a window? Well, it wasn't on my list of things to do tonight. Break window, kick ball, that wasn't the plan, right? Normally a broken window or a broken person or, something that goes wrong is unintentional, right? It wasn't so you want it, when we're giving feedback, we want to assume that. I know you didn't mean to break the window, but what did you think was going to happen when you were throwing a cricket ball around inside? But I'm not assuming you intended bad outcomes. I assume that we're all on mission together here and we're all trying to get to the same thing. So making sure we communicate that, because again, reduces the threat. I'm not sitting in opposition to you. I'm on your side trying to work out what went wrong here and what we can do to fix it in future. And then again, choosing wisely. I only give constructive criticism to people who ask me for it. I would constructive feedback. There's no such thing as constructive criticism, Kim. I only give constructive feedback to somebody who asks me. I will encourage you against your will, but I won't offer, hey, did you think about using this passage instead? I will never give that feedback to somebody who hasn't asked me for my feedback, because it's a bit pearls before swine, that you can be with the best intention. If it's the posture of the person isn't ready to receive, it doesn't matter what you put in front of them, it's not going to be well received. But also as a default, if you come to give criticism that hasn't been, or more constructive kind of analytical negative feedback to somebody that it hasn't been invited, it will only be received as criticism. And you're just talking about relational threat then, and relational damage. So as I said, I will always give encouragement, and in fact, probably annoyingly so. When I'm visiting churches and preaching, I'll always go up to the worship leader and give them encouragement about how they do things, or I'll give some feedback in the sense of encouragement. And often that opens the door for, is there anything else? If you were me, would you have done anything differently? Or this bit felt hard. I don't know what went wrong. How would you fix? It opens a conversation that you get the opportunity to input a little bit more constructively. But imagine a guest speaker comes up, hey, just letting you know that song that you did, it's just a little bit off. And if you could just work, it doesn't matter how nicely I say that, it's never going to go well. Yeah, that's right. That chick from Melbourne, she's full of herself, isn't she? I think she knows things about singing. Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, I think, going back to what Aaron said at the start too, about these being conversations of growth. do you have permission, like is the relationship you have with that person or the role that you have in their life one where they have submitted to the growth process with you, in which case that's what you're drawing them back to. It's like, that I know that you want to grow. I assume that, do you want to talk about some ways that could happen, or what are you thinking about how that could happen? And it's like what I said with the preaching though, there's a point at which if people are not asking for it or open to it, they've made a statement about their willingness to grow or learn or develop, and then I think we make a different decision because of that. Like, you don't get to preach again. Because this is a pathway that requires this discipleship openness and willingness, and if you're not going to demonstrate that, then maybe this is not the place for you, or within like relational and like individual understanding of that. But I think that's the thing you're coming back to all the time is, and this is where having the culture of it, like what we do here is we want to grow and we want to improve. So if you are we, then something of that has to be submitting to that idea. So thinking like in there's obviously like a couple of examples coming to your head, but like thinking about like where in the process have they actually agreed to be on the discipleship journey that gives you that permission, and then how do you bring them back to that offering, or that agreement, if you like. You know how we said, like that, we talked about that sort of stuff where you're reminding them that that's what you have submitted to or said you wanted. Like, is that still true? Like, is this still a thing that we're doing together? Like, checking back to what and which then goes back to the back, which is like establishing clearly, like if you're on this team or you're in this group or if you're whatever, this is some of what our culture is, and then what we do with this, which is why like those, the preachers, they know like this is what we do here is we do feedback and review. So if you're not going to be part of that, then maybe this is not your space right now. That's a good question.
I think that if the context you're thinking about is within your teams, then there's the structural permission that exists. But if it's outside your teams, you probably need to think of the structure of where that might need to come from.
Yeah, if they're under some other structure.
Not invited.
Absolutely.
So if feedback needs to be given, but they're not part of your ministry team, that needs to sort of travel somewhere else to be discerned.
Withholding feedback is choosing comfort over growth. Staying silent deprives people of the opportunity to learn. If you're worried about hurting their feelings, it's a sign that you haven't earned their trust. Because in healthy relationships, honesty is an expression of care. I like that middle bit there. If you're worried about hurting their feelings, it's a sign you haven't earned their trust. And again, it's this, have we created a culture where you're asking for feedback and so I'm giving it, and so, hurting their feelings, I would say my feelings have been very hurt in our review meetings on Mondays, but to the degree that this is going to threaten relationship, no. Of course I want, my sermon was perfect, right? Like what do you mean I have some opportunities for growth? Or when something I thought was amazing has not been received as the path that I went with a sermon, they're like, that didn't make sense or whatever, but I'm invested in that. I've spent weeks writing that, right? So of course there's going to be an attack on my feeling, there's going to be an emotional cost or response. But if the person is worried that Kim is going to be so hurt and offended that this could ruin our relationship, I better not tell her, then it means there's not trust. I'm doing or they're doing or we're doing something that hasn't created that trust. And I think when we just get to this idea of what happens if your culture is soaked in feedback as part of the story, then there is high trust, because feedback builds trust but also needs trust. And so there's this constant way that cascades to positivity, and ends up being really like the currency of the culture is trust. And so that's what you're exchanging on when you have harder conversations or when you go into those spaces that could be a little bit more testy. Creates pathways and language. So if, like, one of the things that used to happen at Werribee when I was there is like because we talked about this feedback all the time. And one of the things that we said is what Aaron said at the outset, that if it's not specific, it's not particularly helpful because, someone says, great sermon. You're like, thank you. Because what? Like you had a really good sleep or you liked my reference, the YouTube clip I played, or, like what? Like, so I don't know next week how to do that again because I don't know what part of that was useful. And I mean, praise and that sort of thing, like, go for it. But it's actually not useful feedback for me. I actually had someone come up to me at a church recently and she came and she goes, could I just give you some encouragement? And I went, oh, yeah, that'd be lovely. And she went, oh, that was the encouragement. Oh, thank you. It was so funny. The look on her face was like, that's all I've got. Like, I'm just encouraging you. There's no content here. I was like, oh, so funny. Yeah, here. Have encouragement. yeah. It's like, I have one for you. Goodbye. Exchanged. So yes, I think too when we think about the trust aspect, if our culture is healthy, I can trust your motives in giving me feedback because often when feedback is hard to receive, sometimes it's because it has an edge of agenda to it. Like, to harken back to a worship thing, it's like, oh, I really liked how you played that fast song that we could clap to, which is basically me saying the other songs are too slow. There's an agenda to it. And so if you've got good trust and good mechanisms and feedback, I can trust your motives because you're on board with me and you're wanting the same shared goal. I think one of the key things that I reflect on in places where I've had high, healthy feedback culture is that I can trust people's silence too. Like I'm not thinking, oh, no one has told me anything about the sermon. That must have been an absolute dud. Like, have you had that experience? Like, no one said anything. Like, that feels worse than negative criticism because, again, the void is like, erring to the negative. But I know can still remember walking off, chatting to people and whatever, and my two pastors, they sort of just wandered off and didn't say anything at all to me, and we went home and it was the end of it, and after I'm like, oh, they didn't say anything. I'm like, must have been all right. Like, that's my default. I'm not thinking, oh gosh, this meeting tomorrow is going to be awful. Like, they must have had so much to say, because I trust that if they genuinely had something to tell me, they would have told me to make sure that I didn't have to live in that uncertainty. And then also I can trust how you're speaking to others about me, because you wouldn't say to other people something you wouldn't say to me in a high trust, healthy feedback environment, because you would have said it to me. So whatever you're saying to other people, I'm pretty sure I know it already, or it's better than what you said to me. Not I'm thinking you're out there saying, oh gosh, Kim. Yeah, no, it takes away the fun, right? Like, so it's like that's hardly fun gossip. And yeah, just final thoughts there about a culture of feedback is intentional, it's overt, we talk about it happening, we demonstrate that it's happened, we indicate that we're seeking it, we show the results from it. Because of that feedback, we're doing these things. Language is developed. So the big language hook for us was just simply the word because. I liked tonight's service because just a little bit of extra prompt for some content, that didn't work because, like, give me a little bit more, like, because it's not, feedback isn't that was good or that was bad. That's just opinion or, praise or not. But yeah, having those language hooks. I know Crossway used to do, like, their language was, is this the Crossway way? Like, that's how they, and it was just a language they had to check with each other. It was a shared language that just nudged people to be a little bit more reflective on what they were doing or what choices they were making. And then they affirmed that. Good job, that's the Crossway way, that's what we do here. But then I think the key thing is if we're doing feedback well, and if feedback is a healthy part of our culture, the culture will be highly encouraging. Like, there will be a strong sense of being built up by the comments and responses and observations of our peers, because that's what we're on about, is building one another up. We want to get better. We want to do best. We want to always have that sense of this mission and vision and goal that we're moving towards, and we want everybody on board, and we don't want to have people that are derailing us from that or distracting us from that. So we're all in this together is going to be this fuel of encouragement that gets us into that place. And so I would say, like, I went to a meeting once, senior leadership, I might have even said this last year, a group of senior leaders, and they were talking about generational ministry, and I'm just like, okay, let's just tell me, what do you think about what's happening in your church? Every single person started their feedback with, look, I'm sorry, but, and then said their opinion. I'm like, look, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. Blah, 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 blah. Next one. Look, I'm sorry, but like, what is going on here? And I got to the end of it, I'm like, you guys realize you all said the same thing, right? Like, you were all in agreement, but something about how, like, that really low trust, there'd been some conflict there and everyone's apologising for giving their opinion that I'd asked for. Like, this is not a healthy feedback culture. Like, it's obvious that in the past, people have been, I don't know, damaged or shut down or negatively impacted by giving their opinion. So they're already apologising that they have one. Like, and I was like, oh. I remember saying to the senior pastor, I'm like, this is not a generational issue. You guys just need to work yourselves out first before we start talking about anything else. There's something else going on in that, and I won't tell you what happened at the end of the story. But yeah, so a healthy feedback culture is marked by encouragement. Have a chat to the people you're chatting with. What's standing out to you in terms of something that you're like, that you might be able to sort of grab onto as, I need to think more about that, or I can see how that would make a difference, or, you know, just some sort of personal reflection about what you might be taking away from tonight in how feedback is or could be part of your context. So just some, a next step, an idea, like, oh, I like that, I need to think about that some more, that has challenged me, or I'm worried about, just, you know, what's coming up for you as you think about leaving out of tonight. And when someone says to you in a week's time, what happened at that feedback culture conversation, what's the thing you think that's sort of bubbling to the surface in that? So have a quick chat about that, and we'll share back, and I'll close in prayer.
Can we actually delve into that a little bit more? So at LEAP, we do stuff about leadership, equipping, applying, and then prayer. So we're moving into the application stage. And I know that feedback culture hasn't been a healthy part of my past. I have been in a lot of toxic workplace environments where everything is about covering your own butt, and that's about it. I've only experienced fleeting moments of healthy feedback culture in my workplaces. So I know it's not a skill I have readily available at my disposal. It's not something that comes naturally to me because I've always had to be defensive because of those scarf things have always been attached to feedback I've received in the past. So I know I'm not leading that well here, but I want it to improve. So how can we do it better? Like, genuinely.
I think just trusting each other, like, as brothers and sisters in Christ, and knowing that love that we have for one another, I think that's a good basis to work from. And the stuff that you mentioned about, where did I write that? Yeah, assuming the best. Yeah, I think that's really, really key. And like, I know in our church family, like, we've got people coming from all different church backgrounds. We're a huge,
Massive melting pot,
concoction.
yeah.
Yeah. But I think just having that foundation of love, I think that's really, really key. Yeah.
Also, I think intentional can be just, Rose, you're doing a great job as the secretary, or Joyce, that was a great service. I didn't book because Encouraging people.
Yeah, and just being encouraging.
Yeah. And making sure that if there are new people, I mean, sadly you're not going to trust everybody, and that's in my background, which I know, and you I trust. Good. Great. No, but
Yeah.
He wore you down, didn't he?
I think the natural step that comes from what Emma's talking about feeling like there's that love, then you're in a position where you can actually take that bold step of actually asking,
Mhm.
because until that's there, you're not really going to feel comfortable to ask because you can think, what are they going to say?
Mhm.
But if you know that there's that sort of support and basically that community that does support you and there's love there, then what you'll get back is actually going to be something you can actually use rather than just sort of
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's communication too. If we communicate to each other, we're getting to know each other a lot better, which means we're going to be able to trust one another and know where each other are coming from in that trust.
Yeah, I think also it's important to actually implement structurally the culture of feedback being a natural, normal part of ministry. And I think on the communication point, on those sorts of things, I don't think we've done that super well. I think we're quite disconnected in our different teams. And I've got some really good ideas about how to improve that next year. And also, there's some changes coming down the pipe, but we'll let everyone know that at the appropriate times. But I want to put together like a key ministry leaders meeting so that quarterly or more often if necessary, but I'm hoping quarterly, if you're overseeing a ministry, you're part of this key ministry leaders team so that you and staff are all, and we meet together, you know, each quarter for communication on the ministry teams level and across teams, because we don't have that at the moment. And so I think it's adding things like that in, and then things like Leap in the future are that team to do stuff with their teams. And so again, we do Leap 4 times a year. That'd be great to have then you benefit with your teams by being at Leap and then going, okay, how as a worship team or how as a mission team do we implement feedback culture in our context? Like that's, I think, is where I'd love us to get to, so that we, yes, have the governance group, but we have the key ministry leaders who meet and converse, and, you know, even within those aspects, you know, including feedback in that. But like one of the hardest things to ask is, what's your experience of me? You know, how do I show up in this context? And so adding those sorts of things regularly into our conversations amongst our own teams, and trying to put in some regular times where we do even formal processes. So like often these 360 feedback things, you know, come up and you know, where you get, you know, 15 people to be super honest about all these sort of things, like, and it's actual a you know, mediated process, or not mediated, but facilitated process. You know, those might be things that we might do from every now and then, so that we learn the skills and continue to improve in that culture. So I guess, yeah, the thing is, how do we do it in your teams? How do we do it as a broader ministry team? How do we do it as a church to do it really well? Yeah, so I'd like to explore a little bit more in that space with for the next 15-20 minutes. I'm gonna take some notes and scribble some things down as you speak. But we might end the recording there anyway, for future, so that. Oh, please.
I would say in response to that though, the thing that everybody can do right now is just encourage more. Like just start there. And because it does what you're talking about, it improves your communication, You get better at articulating what matters, because encouragement should be, when you think about it in terms of your teams and church, you're encouraging towards what you've agreed we think matters. So worship was great this morning because it did the thing that we said we wanted to do. Your contribution to this team is great because it helps us to this, and so it's reinforcing what matters to us. It's practicing our communication, and it's building relational trust. It's like, you're for me, you care about me, you notice me, you love me. So now if I'm looking for somebody to ask for some more constructive feedback, you might be the one I come to, because you've already proven yourself to be someone who I can depend on, and who, as I said, is for me, and where there's a trust that exists. So thanks for the feedback that you've already been giving me. Can I ask you one more thing? Could you tell me something I could do to get better? Thanks that you thought that was great. What would you do if you were me? Where you start building, but encouragement will be the foundation that makes all of this possible at every level of your church, and from leaders into your teams, sideways into the entire congregation. If encouragement becomes the default way that we communicate, this stuff will flow out of it much more smoothly and almost naturally, because it just is a trust building and expanding kind of exercise. Amen.